Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees. It is almost exactly 10 o'clock. Call our meeting to order. All members are here with the exception of Catherine Downs, Elise, and Bunky and Jeffrey. So we have 6 folks here from our official committee. We have a quorum, so we will focus on our agenda. We also have someone from the public, which is so wonderful to see you. Thank you for coming. We'll focus on our agenda. We'll move as quickly as possible through our updates. What I hope we do today is make sure we give everybody a current understanding of where we are on our projects. We'll have some remarks from our members here, I'm sure, all the way through the program and through the agenda, and then we will wrap up for the day. First, I'd like to start a little bit out of order here with some comments from the chair. And I know you'll wait for that every time we get together, but I'm so hoping everybody has seen Beach Life magazine, and this is the show and tell for, which issue is this? September of 2019, has this fabulous article in here about Sturgis Dodge and her husband, Tom Evans, and I hope everybody takes particular note of the tree that they are standing in front of in their front yard, which as I looked at it the other day, I thought, Sturgis and Tom have taken such a beautiful picture, and they fill up almost the entire tree, which I thought was absolutely fabulous. And I think from reading this article and getting to know Sturgis on our group, it really shows why she has such a commitment to canopy trees here in Rehoboth. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I hope everybody gets a chance to read, look at this particular article, and thank you for being so involved in our community as well as your husband, Tom Evans. So just wanted to bring that to the attention, and in case anybody is streaming this meeting, I hope they get a chance to look at it as well. I want to dive right into Arbor Day. And Andrea Hoffman is going to give us an update on where we are with Arbor Day, the plans, and just a status. So take it away, Andrea.
Okay, well, this morning there are new plans actually.
Oh, this is so timely then to talk about new plans.
Liz and I took a little tour this morning. Let me back up though and say that at the last meeting we were talking about the number 30, it's 30 years, and the number 30 is still important, okay? So this morning, we walked over to Central Park, and that is where we were going to do our 30 seedlings. Liz and I found 4 locations in the park. We're going to have 4 classes, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, and we found 4 nice locations for each class to do their seedlings.
When you say classes, you're talking about Rehoboth Elementary School,
Rehoboth
in
Elementary.
case people are streaming and are not following us.
Rehoboth Elementary School. So we've got 4th and 5th grades, and we have 4 locations. And I'm thinking when we get with the teachers, we could talk a little bit about getting plaques made for each of the locations. The kids could make a plaque for their little piece where they're going to be planting, because there are 4 separate ones. So that's the seedlings, and we can do as many seedlings as we want. And in fact, those seedlings may come from the tree in my front yard, which is
So I have a question about that, if it's okay to ask at this juncture. Those 4 locations can hold that size of
Yeah, they're
growth?
clearings in the wood. I mean, it's different than in a landscape, but there's clearings in the woods where they're not shaded essentially. So maybe where trees have fallen or been removed before. So pockets of opening.
I mean, we were clear that they're large areas. and we'll clear them.
And there's 4 separate ones.
Yes,
4
and
different
there's
ones.
4
there's
separate ones. which is-
Several.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have to be that big if we're talking about 30 seedlings total.
And that's what I was
So,
gonna ask, is 30 seedlings?
However many we want, really.
Okay, right,
Okay,
yeah,
I mean,
Right.
30, 30,
Mhm.
whatever, however many we want.
yeah.
But when we left, I guess the way we left things was that I had raised the issue of regular big trees,
Right.
canopy trees. And having started to read Doug Tallamy, I decided I've been converted here, or I know something more than I did. I'm really interested in oaks.
Yeah.
And Liz has given me a lot of time. We've met twice, and we had 2 proposals. One was to plant river birches along the tot lot on Stokely Street. And Liz figured somewhere 6 to 10, 8 to 10 along that really the periphery of the tot lot. But the second idea that we came up with just a couple of days ago, and we've just come back 15 minutes ago, is to do a planting on the strip of, it's actually kind of a semicircle, in Central Park between Cookman and Kent. There's a nice little
Yes.
area. Can people picture that?
Mhm.
Okay. So today we paced it off, we walked around.
Also on the periphery.
On the periphery, exactly, on the periphery. And Liz sketched out a nice little plan. I see it right up there.
as I was walking.
Oh, as we were walking,
That's-
we have a
Put it on
very
some
nice little
drawer or something.
plan. And it is possible to fit perhaps 6 oaks over there. But we've also, we're talking about some other plantings and just really creating a very, very nice seating area.
That would be
It's a
great.
beautiful,
Yeah.
Is there a
Very
picture we were
nice.
talking
Yes.
here?
Yes.
I'll hold it up on Google Maps.
I'm very excited.
As long as I don't touch my screen. So that's this
Yeah.
section.
It's on the
It's-
corner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
like a dying spruce there and a
Yeah.
dead little
I see
ash
that.
tree.
Perfect.
So let me
It's
ask,
pretty wide open.
yeah, let me ask a couple of questions to give us some grounding in this. Just about the option of river birches. I'm just curious, do y'all consider river birches canopies?
Yes.
Okay.
Really?
Oh yeah, they can grow depending on what
They can
variety,
get high.
60 feet.
Well, you don't cut
Okay.
their heads off.
That's good to know. I have one of those. Good to know.
Some of them grow smaller. Some of the varieties might be 40, 45.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I'd like to say though, Doug Tallamy says oaks, okay? Number
Yeah,
one
yeah,
rated,
right, well,
rated
It is the
tree.
preference,
Yes.
is the absolute preference.
Yes.
So just back up with me, Andrea, for 1 minute. On the seedlings,
Yes.
what would this is really to Andrea and Liz, what's our expectation for those seedlings? I don't know when you plant something that's that small, what is the expectation for them? Do 50% of them make it? Do 75% of them make it? I don't know enough about seedlings because I don't buy seedlings. I buy much bigger items. So can somebody help me about what's the expectation about those?
I'd say you're probably right in the ballpark, just give or take. We would do them in New York. That's what we use in our restoration sites, like 20, 40,000 a season.
Yeah.
And then we would go back and we'd GPS and survey them. And sometimes you'd go to sites and I couldn't find one. And sometimes every single one was still there and doing well. So mixed results.
So do you think like 50% is reasonable?
I think it's
to
more
expect?
than reasonable. Yeah.
And how do they survive? Do they survive just survival of the fittest in nature, or do we help them along with watering or any other services, or do you just let it happen the way nature intends?
Say probably in between what you would consider services and just letting it go, because they'll still have to keep like ivy and Virginia creeper away from them, keep it cleared. We'll have to consider doing some sort of cage for the deer, because I'm thinking that the deer would love to come and eat fresh
those.
buds.
Brand new.
And then as they grow older, if you go in the woods, you'll notice deer rub marks on a lot of things. I mean,
Yeah.
we even have them on London planes sitting at Lake Gerard. So we'll probably have to do some sort of trunk wrap as they get older too. So they'll need help, but not the type of help like where we need to go out and mulch around them and like,
Okay.
yeah.
And Liz, what is our resource for that help? Bless you.
For keeping the ground clear, like the ivy and
The
stuff.
ivy and so forth.
Me and my one part-time employee. So, I mean, I'm the one that's been taking care of, with the help of volunteers in the park. A
Okay.
lot of you guys were involved initially when we cleared the ivy off the
Yeah.
tree. And then through volunteers and some in-house, if we have 15 minutes to spare at the end of the day, they know to
Okay.
go there.
Okay.
So between that, we've been able to really significantly reduce the ivy. I'd say probably 25–30% of what it was when I started.
Okay.
So I'm hopeful that those areas you pick need to be maybe treated 1 or 2 more times before we do the planting, and then they should be okay to go. But like everything else in life, it still requires a little TLC.
Right. Okay.
But I'd say not much more than any other seedling in the woods.
Okay.
They're everywhere.
But you don't need to water them like you would a bigger tree.
No, I would say when we were in New York, maybe if we went through a really extreme drought and we used hydrants for watering there, maybe once,
Okay.
possibly.
And what kind are they? Did you say? I missed that.
I think your
There
front
are, the
yard.
seedlings are all.
Is it your front yard tree?
Front
Talk
yard
about
tree.
white oak.
Andrea, just for the record, talk about where these seedlings will be coming from.
The seedlings are going to come from 137 Henlopen Avenue.
37 Henlopen Avenue, everyone, thank you. They're local. They are local.
They are very local.
They're not visitors, they're local.
They are very local.
Well, I mean, that is good though, because they're gonna be
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
the baby of a tree that's dealt with salt air and
You're
our
right,
soil
yeah,
and
Yeah.
Right.
That's,
locally sourced.
All 30 of them from there? Wow.
I had
She
thousands.
gets a plethora of them.
Yes.
And this
It is my
event,
pleasure.
and just so y'all know, going forward, I'll be asking a lot of probing questions about how we're going to maintain the investment that we do.
Yes.
You know, whether or not we have to do anything extraordinary or think about, are there any additional resources? We need to be thinking about the big picture on what's the expectation
Yes.
of the project, and 3 years from now, how are we going to look at it and say we met that expectation, as opposed to looking at something and saying that really didn't pan out the way we thought it would. I think you had a thought, Andrea?
I was going to say, in addition, I like the idea, and I have no idea whether the teachers are going to agree to it, but there's always the possibility of extending this and the teachers using an outing if they wanted to go back and look at, and work on whatever needs doing at these sites. If they decide to do that. I have no idea whether they would, but it's certainly, put up the nets, learn how to take care of trees.
Well, I'll leave that to you and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Liz to talk
Yeah,
about
I mean,
if that would
that's-
be a good source or not.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
certainly have not talked to the teachers, but it's
Well,
certainly a possibility.
It's about involving
Yeah.
the kids.
Yes.
It's not that we need their help to put up
Right.
fences,
No.
but to
Yeah.
keep them interested.
Well, and
more
the
than
reason I
anything.
asked Liz is I'd hate that any damage got done,
Well, I can tell you after working with thousands of yes.
Yes.
You'll
That happens.
inevitably have somebody that no matter how many times you tell them to pick up the tree from the pot, pick it up from the stem breaks in half.
Yeah.
It happens.
But that,
As
So-
long as it's trees and not people getting.
Exactly. So the intention for this is March?
yes,
This is for March of
March.
2020?
correct.
Okay.
March of 2020.
So talk a little bit more about next steps. What would be a reasonable next step,
Well, I think.
just off the top of your head?
Sturgis and I are going to meet on Monday to begin discussing programmatic things, teacher meetings, all of that, those details, the kinds of things that we did last year.
Same kind of
Yeah.
repeat, sort of.
So we're moving the show basically to Central Park as opposed to at the school. And the Arbor Day celebration, or we're going to be celebrating it basically in March.
So let me just get this straight, just this is more for me. So the leadership on this from our committee are the three of you, Andrea, Sturgis, Liz. Because I don't want to, I want it to be very, very clear who's got what role in what project.
Yes.
Okay, so y'all are working together. And your contact at the school.
Same two, Dawn and Jackie.
And Jackie.
And
Kessler.
they're in,
Okay.
you know, they are
And there's no
definitely-
problem with them coming, bringing the children, not to City Hall, but just further, a little bit further over to,
No, I wouldn't, yeah, well, we haven't talked to them about it. They don't know that we've moved to
That's one of
Central
the-
Park, but
what's
that's one of the
next is
things that's
we're-
next.
you'll talk to them about
Yes.
that. And you'll talk to them if are they intending to do another poster contest, do you think? That's kind of their,
discuss.
it's kind of their pattern.
There's also, and you know, you want to talk about the other possibility, they've talked to us about using the new, I guess, area that they've got at the school. Actually, you want to talk a little bit about
Well,
the science
I went
fair.
over to the school, I got in on the tour, so I got to run around the new school, which is, goodness, it's fun, beautiful. But there's this great area outside that you might have heard about that's designed for outside programs. It's kind of in this
Like an
semicircle,
amphitheater.
there's like AstroTurf and a stage, an indoor-outdoor stage and all this kind of thing. And so Don's idea last year was, or this spring when we did kind of our recap, was why don't we sort of put our science fair together with a tree and environmental program and invite the parents and the entire community and have, you know, somebody from Delaware Forest Service and somebody from MERS, so kind of make this a part of the program. So anyway, that was their idea, is because one of our kind of regrets was when it was at the school, we just weren't able to have a whole lot of people there, you know, outside of our kind of our little group, city and all. And they said, Don said, well, here'd be a great idea that this would be open to the public. It could be this big thing. And so we've yet to kind of
Get your
you know,
arms around
arms
all that.
around
Yeah,
all
okay.
of
That's
that,
been
but it sounds
proposed.
intriguing.
Yeah,
It
and
sounds intriguing.
they explicitly invited us, you know, they really asked us,
Yeah.
interested in
Yeah.
being in on this. So I think that's a great opportunity.
And it also looks like something that the school is already kind of going to do, and I'm not sure that, you know, there'd be a whole lot of extra sort of work for us to do, except maybe trying to publicize this and kind of get more people from the community there.
But it's all around the March.
It's
event.
right.
Okay.
It
Yes.
would be before it or after it or somewhere
Yeah.
in there.
And is
So
there a
it-
specific date?
It would be
March is
late.
not.
Not
No,
yet, not
no,
yet, no, no.
We'd have to find out when their
And we basically
science
make
fair.
our own Arbor Day.
We were just kind of, you know, brainstorming, and they just said this would be an interesting
Yeah, that would be
opportunity.
it,
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, because the one thing I also want us to keep in mind, as your plans really start to shape up with the school and we start to narrow in on, you know, when the timing is going to be, I think it would be a great opportunity for members of the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees to give an update to the commissioners on their regular scheduled update for the advisory committee, just to keep them all informed. I mean, we have a commissioner-elect, we have a current commissioner, Dick Byrne, and Susan Gay with us now, and as well as a former, I love to say that, as well as a former.
Almost.
Let me say it again, as well as a former. Thank you, Jesus. Anyway, and for the record, Catherine Downs has just joined us. That's great. So we'll keep that in mind of how to really present our projects from conception to pre-implementation to implementation, and then feedback on the back end, what we did well and what we may need to improve going forward, or where we want to go with our projects.
Glad you said the back end, because
Yes.
most people forget about that. Like how we did with Arbor Day was perfect. You guys spent a lot of time planning the event.
Yes.
We had a successful event. Then we scheduled a recap meeting, and it kept us flowing, and we were able to analyze what went well, what maybe
That's
we could
great.
improve upon, where we wanted to change. And I think a lot of times everybody. I don't even think just municipalities. I think in general in life we do stuff and then we just move on.
Right.
So I think that was a perfect example of how we recap everything and move forward at the same time.
So we'll use that pattern going forward. So good luck on Monday, the 16th, with the teachers, right?
Well, it's gonna be
Did
the
I get
two
that
of
right?
us.
It's just
the
us.
two of
Oh, I'm
us,
sorry.
Kind of
Just us.
like
Let
what
me correct
steps.
myself
Yeah,
here.
Yes.
the two of us are gonna meet and just sort of
Okay.
put our plan in place.
Tony, are you gonna come and give the periodic updates at the commissioners meeting?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Because
Microphone.
it would be great. to
You know, when I
put
don't
on
have
that.
my glasses on, I can't hear you. I think it will depend on what the update is. I don't need a spotlight for any reason. I would much prefer the members of the working group to be the messengers. So
Well, that's great. I
we
just think
can
it's
have that
important to have
argument
that.
at some point.
I think it's important to have that.
I do too.
Yeah, I think, so I'm glad you said it. but,
Yeah, so we'll figure that out, and I've got that in mind right now for some other things that are going on. So, shall we leave Arbor Day? Unless there's any additional questions, comments, concerns, feedback, Sturgis?
Just kind of question about money.
Yeah, I was just.
Is that the kind of,
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly what I was.
Yes.
So, do we need to do anything about that at this point? We are going to, I think Liz is going to flesh out, what the plan is, so.
The way I feel about that structurally is that since we have Liz, who is part of our city,
Good.
she will be the first line of talking with y'all about, is it something that her budget can manage? Or is there a need for a discussion about additional budget funding? And always keep in mind, I always feel very strongly that if there are additional funds, that you can talk about that internally first, and then if it rises to the level that it needs oversight, the city manager, the mayor, as well as the commissioners, those are all resources to talk about funding.
Yeah, it's just everybody has to remember how far in advance we do our budgets. We'll start working on them basically now to go into effect April 1st, and
Right.
March is basically a no spend month,
Right.
pretty much for everybody. They even cut off like invoices and stuff like that because they can't be processed. So, and not to mention that everybody's usually out of money then. So, going forward in the future, March is generally a bad month to be requesting funds close to. But if
Well-
we know that every year on Arbor Day we're
Yeah.
going to spend $5,000,
Yeah.
then we can put that in there just
Let me-
as a placeholder.
Let me just say, I love the use of the word placeholder, that if we know we're gonna need some funding, to me, that placeholder needs to be in there. And current Commissioner Byrne and Commissioner-elect Gay will be part of the budget exercise, so I know they'll be looking out for what this team does or does not need. Also, keep in mind, and I've said this before, and I know the city manager and I are on the same wavelength about this, the mitigation fund that we have for trees that has funding in it, if there is a justified special request for planting or possibly some other extraordinary issue that we want to deal with, those issues can be discussed from a funding standpoint with our very capable city manager, mayor, to determine how do we move forward, even in a month like March,
Because it's already
if
there.
we haven't already put a placeholder in there. So I feel very, very strongly, having been told very credibly that,
You hear that, Sharon? Streaming live.
she's right there.
I didn't even know she was here.
And she's smiling at me with that look, like, okay.
She's not disagreeing with you.
No, she's
so-
not yet anyway.
Make the record show.
So, but I think the placeholder is important for the upcoming budget.
And we think that's a relatively 5,000. relatively reasonable. I mean, because if then we come and we say, well, we want to plant 100 2-inch trees next year, that'll be, but if we always think it's going to be similar to the upcoming one, then
Yeah.
I think 5,000.
And I don't know if 5,000 is the right number, Liz, but I would expect you will.
Well, it
Based
depends.
on what the overall concept is. If we have a $5,000 project and we put a $1,000 placeholder in there, that's really not gonna be very helpful.
Yeah.
But I trust you're gonna know from your experience and instinct about how much money will be necessary.
Yeah, if you guys tell me what
Yeah.
you want to do, I
Yeah.
can come up with a price
Yeah.
pretty easily, to be honest.
And I think there's no doubt in my mind that Andrea and Sturgis pretty much have a vision of what this Arbor Day 30th anniversary is supposed to look like. So we have to be able to fund it and justify it in the budget so that when the commissioners take a look at it, it's well understood what the funding is for.
I don't think this one, I mean, based on what you and I talked about, I think that won't be, maybe $4,000 altogether, because the seedlings are free, we have some land clearing, grading work to do, and then trees to plant. So I don't think that'll be some crazy cost, but we're looking at Arbor Day 2021 is what we'll be budgeting for.
Because it'll go into effect in April.
Right,
and
So
then
we need
fall
to have
right
an
March.
idea of
Okay.
the scope of the project we'd be doing, not this March, but the next.
Right, but for this
Yeah.
March,
This
for this March,
Right.
what I just said still
Yes.
applies.
Yes.
That if there's not funding
Right.
and we need to plant for Arbor Day, to me, that is a request from the mitigation fund.
Great.
I think
I have a
based-
question. Why
Sure.
would we not kind of automatically go to the mitigation fund for this annual planting
We could.
as opposed to the general fund? I mean, that's what it's there for, is to replenish
Yeah, it could
trees
be,
on public property.
we could
in
increase,
the
well,
city.
that would be it'd be a discussion with our Bert and Sharon on how we want to, if it's say 5,000 going forward, do we want to add it into the, say, 7,000 we have
Yeah,
budgeted,
yeah.
or do we want to make a separate line item, Arbor Day
Well, let's do
celebration?
this,
So-
Dick, and thank you for that curiosity
Mhm.
about it. How about next meeting? Let's talk about funding for March of 2020 and going forward.
Okay.
And that'll give y'all time, or give you time to check in with Bert and see.
We're fine, if, based on what we've talked about,
But I mean, going
Yeah.
forward, can we just put additional funds from the
Can.
mitigation?
Mhm.
Well, then it would be, it
Because
would
it's
be.
already there. I mean,
and the whether or not is you want like something dedicated, that if we put 5,000 in there for Arbor Day, we can only use it for Arbor Day. And if we don't use it, it just stays in the mitigation fund. Versus if it goes into like our account, then we can use it for other tree planting, that budget cycle. So it's really up to, it doesn't matter to me either way. There's more flexibility. But if you want it specifically dedicated to Arbor Day and only Arbor Day, then that would be an account.
Well, I'll leave that to Dick and Susan to think about when you line item things versus putting them in your regular budget.
Yeah.
And then we can go
well,
from
I've always
there.
thought the mitigation fund should be for planting.
Yeah, so I mean, it can go in there and say
Yeah.
Arbor Day, but that could include like tree giveaways, or like if we wanted to give them like a little watering can or whatever it may be going forward. It wouldn't maybe just be for tree planting.
Well,
See, I think it should be just for tree
So
planting.
then it would lead
Yeah.
to it being part of the 7 that say we have budgeted this year rather than its own thing. But like I said, I think
Okay,
Commissioner
that's
Sharp's right, we'll discussion.
And I,
for-
I would also want to get a sense of how much goes into the mitigation funding. I used to know and now I've forgotten what goes into it each year.
I am concerned that some of the incidentals do get covered, because, I mean, we were a pretty cheap date last year, a couple of poster boards. But I want to make sure that that's not an issue. And I don't know how much we spent, you probably have an idea of that.
Okay, guys, instead of trying to walk
Yeah,
through it
yeah.
now, I'm gonna put, for our next agenda, you'll see funding underneath of Arbor Day, and we can talk a little bit more.
Okay, sorry.
okay, and if I could just,
That's all right.
Tony, emphasize
Yes.
something that you said. earlier, and we have said the last meeting or two, the critical importance of follow-up maintenance once these trees are planted. Because we have lost a number recently because there's not a maintenance plan.
Well, and
There's no
I'm,
follow-up watering taking place.
I think we need to,
And that's, I know that's a whole topic in and of itself, but it needs to show up.
I think you're right.
in
And
our
I think
notes.
it's all part of our, starting with our big picture visions and ending with what we just talked about our projects, with making sure we've got the back end really shored up to make sure the investments that we're making are, they're able to withstand.
Tony, I was
Terry.
just going to mention, because today I just have a real quick presentation under all things improper.
Yep.
But included with that, I have recommendations, and then I'm open to suggestions, but I was going to cover that in just a few minutes.
So let's move quickly, unless there's an objection, to the commemorative tree.
Yes.
And Terry, would you like to
Sure.
kind of just give everybody a quick recap of where we are at this juncture?
Well, at this point, I hope all the members have received copies of the brochure. All of you have received them? And where we are right now is that,
We have plenty.
yes, I was going to say. And
I have a stack I'm gonna take to coastal cleanup tomorrow, just to have it
Oh,
on the
great.
table
Okay.
there.
In fact, Susan, I have to thank you because the RBHA, oh, thank you.
Oh, I heard, yeah.
Also gave a donation.
Yes.
So where we are right now, just in terms of funding, we have approximately, we've received 10 of the donation forms at this time. We have.
10?
Well, but three are of the $1,000 level,
Oh, that's wonderful.
2
I
are the
thought it was
600
5.
level, and 5 are at the 350 level.
Yeah.
And then I have just verbal commitments. You know, Andrea's been talking to people, and I know members of the committee have been talking to people, so we have some verbal commitments of other people who are contributing. And just a real quick rundown on the dates. We are still planning to have the presentation approximately October 4th. What it is based on is that we have decided that we are going to do it in conjunction with the Rehoboth Art League because they are doing the mural outside.
Terry, you just said October 4th. Is that?
Yeah, I don't think, I was
day?
talking to Chris yesterday, and she
Yeah.
thinks it'll be later than
They
that.
probably
In
will.
fact, she gave me a couple dates we can talk about, but go ahead
Okay.
first.
And I was going to meet with her after
Oh, I'm
this.
sorry.
Yeah.
Because
So it's not
originally in the
today.
meeting, when we had said October 4th, it was based on the mural being finished.
Yeah.
No, so I think
Right.
it's been pushed back.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
so,
just so people are aware, because I'm not sure people on the committee are aware, like Katie, you were shaking your head. We're doing the presentation in conjunction with the exterior mural that's being done by the Rehoboth Art League. When that's done, we're going to have the two organizations, the Commemorative Tree Program and the mural, done at the same time as far as the presentation. So it'll be in October. And where we're at right now, I'm not sure where they're at in terms of finishing or doing the mural, but we met, Andrea and I met about a week ago with Joe from the management office here at the City Hall, with the artist Bill Wolf, who's creating the tree itself, which is beautiful. It's finished and it is beautiful. And then we also met with the engraver, Ron Noynes, who's doing all of the leaves. They're gonna be doing engraving on the leaves. The only hiccup that we had was in terms of attaching the tree physically to the wall, but I think we've come up with a solution to that, so that'll be done by September 20th.
24th.
Well, you'll have the,
Yeah.
you'll
Oh,
have
sorry.
the wood inside the wall for the attachment,
Yeah.
but then the tree's gonna be
Installation.
installed around the 24th of September.
So those will be up there for the public to view even before?
No,
the-
we're gonna cover it.
You
We're
are
gonna
gonna
try to
cover it,
get some, you know,
Paper.
artistic,
right.
paper. There'll be an overlay, so it'll be covered before the presentation.
so just let me get clear. The presentation itself, or the unveiling of it, will be in October.
Yes,
It will not be October 4th.
no,
Another date is going to be
correct. Determined.
determined, and I'm wondering what is the process to determine that date?
I have the date already from
Okay, this is
Chris.
why I'm asking,
have it.
who knows
Oh,
what
She
here.
told me yesterday.
Okay, and she gave me two
okay.
dates. What do you have?
When she tell you?
October 17th or 22nd?
17th is what I put down, proposed though.
Okay.
So I have proposed join
And that is a
Rehoboth Art
Thursday.
League, Coastal Camera Club, Mayor's Advisory Committee on Tree in the mural.
So Liz, Liz and Susan, how is the decision gonna be made? Or is it already made? I just need to get precisely clear. is it the 17th or is it the 22nd?
I wrote down in my
7.
schedule proposed.
So
So
who has
still
the
not
final-
locked in?
It's not, I don't think it's locked.
Okay, so it's not locked in.
But who's gonna make the final decision on the exact date? Is it Chris, or is it the REL, or,
The city.
no,
It's-
who in the city?
I'm gonna say it's with the city manager and the Rehoboth Art League, which are the lead here, because
Okay.
we're a little bit ahead
Yeah,
of the mural at the
in fact,
moment.
Andrew, I was gonna talk to you, we might wanna delay Bill a little bit,
So,
instead of putting it up so early.
okay,
I'll talk to you
Well, why
afterwards.
don't we say right now, does anybody have a serious problem with the 17th or 22nd? Right off the bat?
No,
Okay.
no.
no,
And it would be during, Chris was very,
During the day.
yes, during the day, somewhere around the, like, I put down tentatively 1 to 2.
So these are weekdays?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the 17th of Thursday.
17th Thursdays, 22nd is a Tuesday.
Okay.
So unless somebody has serious objections.
Well, and to me, whatever dates are on the agenda right now, we've got to wait and see how the weather shapes up for the
Yes.
finishing of the mural. So honing in here, like on the 3rd week of October is helpful.
Yeah.
So we know it won't be before then.
Yes.
So, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, and I apologize, because I got into town last night and I wanted to meet with Chris anyway, so that's good to know, it's either the 17th or 22nd now. So anyway, I would just encourage all of you to, talk to your friends, relatives, neighbors about the Commemorative Tree Fund. Anybody have any responses from people that they'd like to share? As far as comments that have been made or anything?
I've
talking to
gotten
people?
a few,
Are they negative or positive?
well, mostly positive. The only one, somebody wanted, a specific location, which we couldn't guarantee, obviously. And then other ones, I had somebody interested in knowing what the future, like I told them Rehoboth Avenue was the main one this year that the funds would be used for, and then what the future projects were. Because people are interested in donating in things that are gonna be like adjacent to them, which makes sense, right? So like if you live along Scarborough, you would like to see trees planted, theoretically, if we didn't have any trees there, planted on Scarborough. So a couple of things like that. And then in this, we're kind of approaching the holiday season, if you will, and that's when most of the inquiries do come about. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Liz, I was going to ask you, how do we answer people if, in terms of Rehoboth Avenue, what block are you kind of thinking of? I mean, are you going to be
It's-
scattered along Rehoboth Avenue, or do you have a specific block in mind for where to plant the trees?
No, they're in the median of Rehoboth Avenue,
Sure.
basically starting at the bandstand, going all the way to the circle.
Okay, so, okay,
The whole
in the
length.
median.
Less towards the bandstand, because most of those trees are in, we have a couple of like really old empty spots, but most of them are in good shape, like the lilac trees and stuff like that.
So, and we're gonna come back to Liz in a minute for just some general update around the city. So let's try to close out commemorative tree status. Catherine, yes.
What type of trees are being planted, or do we not know?
I can tell you once we get back to me.
Once we get back to Liz.
Wait my turn.
Yes, wait your turn, everybody. Agenda. So, okay, so commemorative tree, our work of art that I think everybody's gonna be extremely proud of. Anything else on that? Any questions, comments? So we'll just keep plugging along. I as well have several people who are in the pipeline that have not turned
Working 'em.
in. Yeah, we're working them, living, yeah. But most people that I've talked to find the program itself very intriguing. So,
Don't you think once it goes up and people can see it?
Oh, yeah.
I think,
Oh, yeah.
I think
I think we'll have a
huge,
Huge difference.
my
and I certainly hope
Yes.
so.
theoretically going forward, based on our past data with the commemorative or memorial tree program, I would expect us to do 10 to 15 a year. So the fact we already have 10 in just like
Well, we don't have
a couple
10
of months.
trees, we have 10 donations, and 3 of them are for $1,000.
Yeah, so the fact that we have 10 leaves, so
Yeah.
to speak, is
Right, yeah.
a really good
Yeah.
start, I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am leaving commemorative tree. Okay. Next on our agenda is discussing our path forward. Design standards were part of Jeffrey's passion at the time. He is not here today, so we're gonna skip over that. And anything of interest or importance on ordinance. Sturgis from the Law Oversight Committee on the tree ordinance.
We're continuing to plug along.
Okay.
I am partnering with Hoyt on working on the tree ordinance in place of, first it was Julie Davis and Sandy Bieber, and both those folks have departed, so he and I are now working together more closely, and we're working with Liz to get her perspective. Since the last meeting, we worked on a definition of protected tree, revision of submission of tree plans, tree plan inspection, tree removal permits, and mitigation of protected trees. And, you know, there's a lot of detail. I think this is gonna take a while until we finally kind of hammer all this out, you know, because what we're doing right now is sort of working on these things a little bit in isolation. So there's going to be a point at which we have to kind of try to push the pie all back together and see if how coherent it is, you know. So I think we want to make sure we minimize unintended consequences. So there's some novel things that we're looking at in terms of incentivizing some behaviors, disincentivizing others, and promoting canopy trees. That's kind of a shorthand.
Well, I wish you the very best
Well, thank you.
of trying to get something that will be really good for the city.
Yeah, we're really trying to do things that are realistic,
Yeah.
that are fair, that are practical, that are enforceable, and that really promote kind of the vision. You know, promote a result that's consistent with the vision for the city.
Yes, and you've heard my concerns about, you know, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. The
Right.
sooner
Yeah.
the better.
I hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Terry, would you like to move into tree maintenance, all things improper, and you will talk to us and we'll give you feedback?
I was going to ask, does anyone, Dan's not here, but does anybody know how to expand the screen to make it taller?
I do not.
Are we doing this as like part of our educational component?
No, this is just part of the improper and then suggestions. Well, maybe Sharon knows.
Could I ask just a clarification? Has Jeffrey Trunzo resigned from this committee?
I don't expect him to be back.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
At the end of the term.
Because I'm just
Yeah.
concerned that
Yeah.
design standards gets picked up and.
Yeah.
And
And I think we're gonna have
Have
to
a
talk
plan for
about that after the commissioners approve or not approve the composition of this group going forward.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Computer goes up in flames.
So I was just going to begin by saying, instead of focusing on all things improper, I wanted to do some presentations today which are more visual, but I also wanted to end on a positive note as far as some solutions and also some suggestions. So just to kind of follow up for those of you who weren't here last month, I talked about what had happened on Munson Street, and the reason I had brought several photographs of Munson Street is because now that we're doing a presentation on the Commemorative Tree project, I was, in Country Club Estates, and people were asking me what's going on with Munson Street, because 2 years ago, and these are some of the pictures which I showed last time, unfortunately, these are the trees that are still there from 2 years ago. These are just examples I'm going to show you real quick. And this is just the base of one of them where the quote-unquote self-watering, the bag, just didn't self-water, just all the roots were growing up through it. So we've got 12 to 13 trees on Munson Street that have really they've been looking bad for two years now. Go ahead.
Were they planted by homeowners or were they planted?
Oh, no.
No, we
I'll-
did them for,
yeah, I'll get to
a
that.
grant.
Okay.
Okay, so what I wanted to do was, I wanted to just start on like I said, on a more positive note. I kind of highlighted here, these are comments that I took from the commissioners' visions for the city of Rehoboth Beach from the June 3rd meeting. showing, just pulling out some of the visions that they had, Commissioner Burns, Schlosser, Pelosi, Sheffer, and Mayor Coons on, that entailed positive comments on trees, and the support of trees, and the beautification of Rehoboth Beach. And the reason I was pulling out these comments is, in a lot of other cities, and I went around to just some towns in Virginia because I live in Reston, but, everything starts with a vision, and then we, of course, are the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees, and from a vision, you start with a mission statement, of course. And I'm kind of making this on a very elementary basis, but I just trying to help you understand. To preserve and grow the community forest of Rehoboth Beach. So what I did was I went around and I got photographs of just several towns. This is Reston, Virginia. This is another one of Reston, Virginia. They have different types of planting areas. This is Bethesda, Maryland. And once again, this is based on the visions of their committees. And I want you to kind of note where they have the plantings, surrounded by brick. This is something that, and Katie, being a landscape architect, you're familiar with this term. Along city streets, they have what's called the hell strip. And
The
by
what?
Hell strip.
Hell
Yeah.
strip. And the reason
Got
they
it.
call it that, if you look at this picture, you
Yeah.
see how narrow
Yeah.
that area is? They call it that because it is very difficult for trees to grow. But here, now this is Fair Oaks, Virginia. This is, sorry to say, another house strip example. And this is the base of the tree. It's thriving, and it's in a very narrow area, as you can see. And I want to point this out because these trees, the flare of the tree is above the mulch, and that's very important for the growth of trees. Just real quickly, I'll show you. Here's another one of Fair Oaks, Virginia. Note the thin hell strip it's growing in. This is more decorative. This is Herndon, Virginia. This is Sterling, Virginia. Uplit at night. And I know these are expensive, but I wanted to point out this detail. A lot of these small towns, they do have enclosures where they, people don't walk all over the understory beneath the trees. And then this is one last one, just for visual. This is the city of Fairfax, Virginia, and they have a row for blocks. And notice how narrow, once again, quote unquote, their hell strip is, but they have wonderful sycamores growing. And look how narrow this is. This is literally, the space is six bricks wide, but they put the gator bags on.
How wide?
6 bricks.
Six bricks wide, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
1, 2, 3,
Can't be more
4,
than
Yeah,
5, 6.
yeah.
Pretty narrow.
Terry,
So-
do any of these or many of them have an irrigation system?
No, I was going to get to that in the
Okay,
presentation because
good.
I wanted to give you some examples.
All right.
So the reason I showed you that is kind of just set the tone because, and there again, I don't want to be negative because I am going to end on a positive note. But based on the vision statements in Rehoboth, I went out and took pictures in Rehoboth on Rehoboth Avenue. And for 3 years now that I've been on the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees, I've continued to state that the city has to set the tone. That individuals, like we're going out to pursue now funding from individuals, they have to see that the city has set the tone in terms of we love trees, we support trees, we will continue to maintain and preserve trees. However, these are pictures from last week of our Main Street. That's Rehoboth Beach, Rehoboth Avenue, these are all Rehoboth Avenue. The irony with this one is, I hate to say it, but when I took a camera and I zoomed in, you've got this tree, which is really sad looking, and then you have the money we've spent on these flags, which say, hey, welcome, this is the nation's capital, and yet it's, you've got this kind of look in front of it. It doesn't show that we support trees, that we have a vision for trees. Here's another one, planted too deep, there's no flare. Here's another area where a tree just died, it's just left there. There's one.
And before we go to Liz, not to interrupt you, Terry, but I grasp what you're putting forward. Just to be fair, I want everybody to remember that at our last meeting, Liz did talk about, and this is what I wanted to ask her to go back over with us. She did talk about dead trees or trees that are not doing very well, or whatever her criteria would be. Those are getting replaced this fall. So it's really very timely to talk about, are there other things we might want to put on the table and start to generate some conversation about that. I don't want to interrupt you, let you keep going, but I do want to have everybody reflect on the big picture here, is that we are having tree replacement this fall, unless I misunderstood.
Well, and that's, if I
So
could
go
just
ahead.
continue, because that's part of the whole thing. And I'll answer, oh, go ahead.
In the defense of the, just everything, our trees, they, part of what I think that you're seeing is the effect the salt air has on I mean, you can see those trees, the predominant wind direction and salt air has defoliated and has caused the tree to grow in, has deformed the tree. So, I mean, it's not all because it's a, it's a bad practice. It's
Well,
nature. I mean, there are some trees that are more tolerant, but things, leaves with, or trees with, deciduous trees are not necessarily going to accept the constant salt air without looking
Are there any
unattractive.
that do? I mean, are there any?
Let's do this, let's do this. Let's let Terry finish, and then we can come back for
Part of
discussion.
my answer is this, and part of it is, and that's why, like I said, I was gonna end with some suggestions for solutions. Part of it is, I went around town and just looked at, like, this is the tree, and it has gotten better, but this is the tree, a commemorative tree that was planted in the top lot. And the reason I show this is, it's not just the salt air, which I understand. And we do plant indigenous trees that can tolerate our environment. But part of the problem, and I saw this over and over again, and I'm just gonna highlight this. Part of properly planting a tree, you have to, where's the example in the root flare? In nature, and here's what I found over and over again. See this picture? It's called a root flare or a trunk flare. And Katie, you know this as a landscape architect. When you plant properly, you have to let the flare out, because really the tree is still taking in oxygen at that point, and you don't want to interfere with dirt or mulch. This is, a new tree being planted, and notice how they open up and they let the root flare out. What I found over and over again, and I literally took tape measures because, and there again, please, I'm sorry to be negative, but I am going to end on a positive note. This is an example. This is the tree in the top lot. And if you look at this, this is a classic example of a tree that's been planted too deep and then mulched too deep. I dug away where the root flare starts here. It's 6 inches below where the tree was planted. And the reason I show you this is because, this is, you can go on a website, any landscape company can go online and find thousands of examples of how to properly plant a tree. And what I found over and over again, and I'll show you Lake Avenue. Here's a tree that was planted, I believe, in the last year in the bump outs, which I think is a great idea. But this tree, which is I believe a honey locust, there again, I looked at the base, and incidentally, when I opened it up, I then recovered it. But there again, I looked down, and the root flare was all the way 6 inches below where the mulch and the dirt was put in. And you can see here, you see the damage? This is what happens to a tree when you plant it too deep. It gets all of the moisture, lets insects and different pathogens get in. And that's why a lot of trees do have trouble, because a lot of them were planted improperly. Unfortunately, this is, as of last week, this is our Arbor Day tree. that was planted in, what, April? And, you know, as I've said before, Arbor Day is a great idea, but no one was around in the summer to water it. And once again, when I looked under here, it was planted all the way, the root flare was covered, and, you know, not only was it given a poor chance of survival, but it wasn't watered. So my point is, oh, and here's the last, you can go out back and look at this. These are the row of shrubs that are planted behind City Hall. You can go out and look at them right now. Once again, I looked at all these. Some of them are suffering from lack of water, but there again, these are the lower branches, and the mulch and dirt is all the way up to the lower branches. So once again, it's just, and then I dug down a little bit. It was 5 inches. The flare of the tree, where it should have been planted, is 5 inches below where it is. And the reason I bring this up is because, yes, we do have problems in this area, but I think a lot of these were planted improperly. And the final insult was, someone pointed out to me, this is our beautiful brochure for the Commemorative Tree Fund. And when I went out to the spot around the circle, this is a different view. This is the circle. Here are the dead trees in front of Royal Farm. Here's a fourth one from across the street.
Chris.
So we don't have this view, and my recommendations are this. I just think that we need to pay attention more to, I just call it the bottom line here. Trees that might be planted at the wrong time of year, incorrect planting methods, incorrect application of mulch, lack of watering, and then lack of supervision to make sure that everything was done. And I'm going to quote Mayor Coons here. I have here in his vision statement, he said, but here's the thing. The vision should not focus on what has been done in the past. It should focus on what is possible in the future. So what I did was I made kind of a list of suggestions. And there again, I'm open to anybody to add to this list. One of the things that I would recommend is, because of Munson Street has been neglected for so long, and Country Club Estates is one of the areas where we are pursuing funding for trees, because Country Club Estates, let's face it, they have the least amount of trees in the whole city if you look on the tree coverage for Rehoboth Beach. I would recommend or find out as soon as possible, we need to do something with that street. Those 12, 13 street trees have just been there too long. And I think it would show a great confidence builder if we could do something with those trees. I don't know how we would fund them again, but I think that's where we could start. Arbor Day, I'm glad they mentioned, I was going to suggest Arbor Day, like I've been saying in the past, have it in the fall, but if you're going to have it in March, that's much, much better. So I think that's great. I think Liz has answered this. I'm getting questions about exact locations of commemorative trees, so no, we can definitely say in the medium or Rehoboth Beach. All plantings in the fall again, sound like a broken record. One of the things I would recommend, I went out and I started talking just to different landscape companies. The city's current landscape company, I don't know who it is, but there again, even like I said on Lake Avenue, which is pretty recent, you know, they're doing this again. It's too deep, improper, you know, too much mulch, everything. So I think we should consider talking to other companies, or finding out or educating that company about how to plant properly, and then review all plantings before invoices are paid so that we don't end up with, you know, buried trees and buried too deep. And then I would ask the other people of the committee if you would want to do any further research to look up other companies that might be available, because one of the companies I contacted, they do have watering contracts. So if we are going to put decent-sized trees on Rehoboth Avenue, we cannot let that Munson Street situation happen again. If people are going to be giving us $350, $600, $1,000, and they see the trees going into Rehoboth Avenue, we cannot let that happen again with those dead trees. So we need some kind of, maybe a watering program, which other towns have.
So Terry, I appreciate all the research that you've done and all the work that you've done, but I want to comment on number 8 there. having a criticism of a current contract that's in place at the city. I want to be very, very clear that that may be an observation from us, but at the same time, the role of this committee is not necessarily to look for alternatives. I mean, I think it's great to raise the issues of what you're seeing, and then we have very capable people, I believe, here in the city to take that in and give us back your perspective, your challenges, successes possibly. And I had already told you this morning, I had spent some time over in the top lot on the way to our meeting this morning where you showed the picture of the tree, and it's got a partner over there, there's two trees, that didn't seem to be doing very well. Well, I'm amazed that as of this morning, that tree seems to be, and its partner, both of them seem to be rebounding. I'll put it that way. So I was very excited about that. So, I'm trying to discern the goal, I think, of your presentation is, and you tell me, is the goal of this presentation to get us to dialogue about what is or is not something that we might want to champion here?
Yes, because I
Okay.
think in terms of just immediate response to this, like I said, since we have this current commemorative tree program going on, if we could start somehow with the Munson Street trees, because I keep hearing about that over and over again. They've been sitting there for 2 years dead for 2 years. And then if we could also just go to our current company that we're using and just see if, how they plant trees and, why they're planting in a situation where it almost seems to go against, like you can go to any website, Arbor Day, any of the USDA, whatever, and they're not planting it according to what are considered standards. So that's why I want to find out what they're doing.
And I see and I hear what you're saying. But Liz, let me ask you a question. Are you in a position today to talk a little bit about your observations of some of these issues that are being raised? And then maybe we can decide what is a path forward and make sure that we're in our lane and the city employees are in their lane, and we're all here for the same goal of making sure that we've got preservation and
Because one
growth.
of the things too is that I found out that there are companies, instead of us trying to get a watering truck and a staff and all of that, there are companies that contract with towns all along here, Dewey, Rehoboth, Lewis, wherever, and they have a watering maintenance program.
Well, and I'm anxious to hear from Liz, do we need that? So maybe for a few minutes, Liz, talk about some of these things. And City Manager Lynn, would you like to weigh in on something before you may have to leave us? I don't think it's on.
Yes, good morning. Just wanted to,
The button.
There's a switch right on top if it has batteries. But there you go.
thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to briefly comment that all of these 1 through 8 suggestions I've heard from through the grapevine one way or another. I've discussed them with Liz multiple times, and there's always been a succinct answer from the city arborist. So I would ask her to go through them one by one, not spend a lot of time on them, but start with number 1, and I think that you'll find the explanations reasonable, if you will. Clearly, there needs to be improvement, and I appreciate you, Terry, following through with this and pointing this out. It's unacceptable to me that these photos are being shown at this time. I see them on a daily basis, but again, I think there's a reasonable explanation, and clearly we need to pay attention and improve on this.
One thing I was going to mention too, like I
Thank you.
talked to Tony last week about it. You know, I feel like I'm the bearer of
Microphone.
tidings, but-
Microphone, Terry, you're
We'll hear ya.
listing.
But I feel, you know, these are questions that people are asking me and other people who are trying to put this brochure out there saying, can you give money for the city to plant trees? This is not just my reaction, this is the property owners' reactions. you know?
Yeah, and that's not good. So I realize that. Liz, if you could take it, I'm not taking over your committee, I'm sorry. But I think it would be beneficial if Liz commented, you know, from 1 through 8 here.
Let's
Well,
do.
I'd rather go back to even before when she showed pictures of the so-called examples. So many of those made me cringe. So when you want to plant trees in a limited situation, it's based on root space. Putting a London plane in a 2-foot wide section is like one of the worst things you could do. And it leads to the problems that we see 15-year-old trees declining that should be living 50 years or so.
And these are ones that were planted when the streetscape was done.
Well, no, I'm thinking like even the picture she showed of the tiny little narrow like thing where she said they planted London planes.
Oh, right.
That's a
I see.
nightmare. That's
Okay.
thousands of dollars a sidewalk, thousands of dollars of tree removal, and trees that after 15 years look really sad.
Okay.
So the reason we know that is because everybody's done it and we've learned.
Yeah.
And we've moved on, because one of the cool things about urban forestry, arboriculture, ecology is that they're especially ecology, but they're relatively new fields in the grand scheme of things. So every year there's new information, there's new tree species, there's new products and data, and I mean, even the experts come out with books and say, hey, what I wrote 10 years ago, it's not so true. It used to be that, you know, we didn't want to prune trees at planting. Now you can take off 30% and they're great. So it makes it interesting because it's ever evolving.
So take us to Munson Street.
So Munson Street is really my fault, and it's not the watering because I had staff and we did water. It was the tree selection. So by the time we got all the approvals that I needed to plant the trees, the species that I wanted were not available. So I had to choose. I chose a hornbeam, and they didn't like the concrete, all the concrete around them, and it like essentially burns the leaves. Even the ones that are alive have like the almost look like a dogwood, how they get the crispy leaves from a disease.
Yeah.
So that was really just live and learn. It was not my first time doing street tree planting, but it was only my second year here.
So Liz, are those coming out in the fall and being replaced?
With
Okay.
the species I originally wanted,
Yeah.
that now I can get.
So can we tell,
I want to be very clear about this. I think I should have asked Liz at our last meeting when she said all dead trees are going to be replaced this fall. I should have asked, does that mean, or what exactly does that mean? And it does include Munson.
Yeah, and even the hornbeams that are still okay, that I don't want to have, like, there's no point because we're going to struggle.
Right, because you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
so Liz, what's going in
Unfortunately.
instead? What's going in on Munson?
I chose the Nyssa sylvatica, which is what I wanted to begin with.
I'm sorry, what
Say
are
that
they?
again.
Nyssa sylvatica?
Which is,
Nyssa?
what's the name of it?
Nyssa is what I call it. You could call it Tupelo.
Or Tupelo,
black
okay,
gum.
Tupelo trees.
They're beautiful.
Are they
They
beautiful?
have beautiful.
Does the contractor not bear any responsibility either in terms of not telling, you know, sort of alerting you to that the hornbeam may not have been good for that space, or
They should have been.
or that the time of year, you know, planting them might not have been ideal? I don't
They
know.
should have been okay
So-
for the space, and sometimes you just like golden rain trees should have been the best looking tree on Rehoboth Avenue, and they're not. Sometimes it just works out that way. I mean, they're supposed to be the most hardy tree there is, and they weren't. And I think I know why, but lesson learned. It took them looking like this for ever since they were planted, essentially 15 years. So, yep, all the Munson stuff is going to be fixed up. And the good thing is the other species, the Prunus virginiana, and the purple leaf one, did fantastically.
Yeah, some of them have done.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Arbor Day, change it to the fall. I think that kind of jives the number 4, and I'll have to disagree that all plantings are best in the fall. That's just not true. There are several species that love the spring. And sometimes it comes down to the landscaper or whoever, the location, what's convenient for people. A lot of people in town love fall because they're here. And in the spring, going into summer, they have it as a rental or whatever it may be.
But I think we can all agree that we don't want to be planting in the summer.
In June, June might be okay, but yeah, July, beginning of August is generally not
So
good.
going forward,
I think June's.
we would have to ask ourselves, why would we want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What are we?
I think you
Fine,
already
exact
answered number
location.
three.
Number
No,
3 you've
five.
answered.
5. So
Yeah.
review companies previously planting, and this is where internet research and best practices and actuality in the nursery all combine. Is that you look at these BMPs and they all look great, and when you actually work in a nursery industry and the landscape industry, you learn that sometimes exactly what it says isn't necessarily possible. So in the landscape industry, when they grow plants, they do what's called stepping them up. So as they grow, they put them in bigger and bigger pots. And as they do that, they put soil on top every single time. So a lot of times when you get plants, and keeping in mind that certain trees like crepe myrtles typically don't have a definable root flare. Some of them do and they're really old. But when you get them from the nursery, the root flare is not uncovered. It is covered in soil because they have been stepped up. When they get planted, you can excavate to the root flare, but then it becomes less sturdy in the ground. So it's like a catch-22. Most companies, I don't think excavate them. I think the best way is a couple of years in, once you remove the stakes and they're more solid in the ground, is really when you go and you do that root flare excavation, you cut or curtail any girdling, circling, kinked roots, that type of stuff, which every tree has. A maple, that's all they have. It just depends.
So let me just cut to the bottom line. I'll be the one to ask the question. So, are you satisfied with your current level of resources from the landscaping contract?
What do you mean by level of resources?
Well, the scope of work that's in that landscaping contract, I just want us to level set. Are you satisfied with it?
I mean, there's always room for improvement, and
Of
that's
course.
why that's why I do bi-weekly inspections on all of our sites. That's why we don't go a couple weeks without talking to Spizzato. We meet with them several times a year. And I think they've improved their performance since I've been here, and whatever I ask for, they do.
Okay. And I'm also wondering, because I'm hearing you from the standpoint of any company can improve. I mean, if we look at the big picture of our city, we have quite a bit going on here for our little 1 mile square.
Yeah.
So we have to, I think, be cognizant of that. But any other resources that you might need, and especially can you address the issue of watering?
Sure. So going forward, like most municipalities have both large and small, I'm gonna have Spizzato do the watering because all landscape companies have a watering truck.
And so can you talk a little bit, Liz, about what the frequency of that will be, or what your expectation of them will be?
Sure. So when they first get planted, they'll probably water them twice a week to get them established. Maybe like probably 15 gallons twice a week is what they recommended, and that's more than I would have even thought, to be honest.
And this will be for all of your new plantings in the fall.
That's good.
Yeah, and
That's good
then
news.
going forward, I'll have it through the end of next fall on a 15 to, the bags say they hold 15 to 20, but it's conservatively saying 15 unless there's like 3/4 to an inch of rain in that week period, which is kind of the standard. And one of the problems we face is, unlike in a yard where you have all this lawn and grass and mulch to soak up the stormwater, we have tiny little pits, and when you put the watering bags on, they prevent any rainwater. So like in Rehoboth Avenue median, they block almost probably 2/3 of the tree pit. So unfortunately they need and the soil doesn't hold it as much because there's not enough soil there to support the trees. So presents its own challenge. And just like talk about the hornbeams of the burn, it's the same thing with the flowers at the bandstand. You go and you touch the soil, and the soil's wet, and the flowers look dry because it's just so much sun, so much concrete, so much salt air blowing in. To address Katie's point, that's why, especially on the ocean block of the south side of Rehoboth Avenue, all the trees are, and honey locust is about as salt tolerant as you can get for a deciduous tree. That's just, it just is what it is.
I think it's great to hear that there is a watering program, because I think that's really, really essential. So no, I think it's great, because this is what I wanted to hear. That's
I think
why I
we're
said
knocking out your list, which is really
well,
good.
because at the end, that's why I'd love to hear
Yeah.
other suggestions, you know?
Yeah.
So no, I think it's great to hear that.
And one thing, as far as the planting goes, I mean, I know what you see online, and I know how to plant. Liz knows how to plant. And it's not that we don't, or the owners of the company don't know how to plant, or the crew manager doesn't, or know how to plant. I mean, they do, but the people that are out there working and doing the actual installation, I mean, there is a constant flux of people moving through these companies.
Well, that's why I'm saying it takes a supervision, you know, because I know, it takes a supervision to make sure they're doing it properly. But no, I think it's all positive, because it's good to hear, you know, this information, especially the watering is great.
Well, and just think, we also don't know all the logistics. So say you go and you dig your hole to plant the tree, and there's water in that hole.
Exactly.
You're gonna plant the tree above grade. So all these site conditions, or you go and you hit a giant root from a nearby oak tree that you don't wanna sever. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that site conditions can dictate. Construction type soil that's really heavy, that can affect how you plant a tree, and intentionally so. And like I said, it evolves to that. Back when I was in New York, if we had wet sites, we would obviously choose trees. You would hope you would know that it was wet in advance, but you didn't always. We would even put gravel in the bottom, which now you're like, oh my God, no. But like I said, it's what makes the field so interesting, is that we're always changing and evolving.
So Liz, just to be clear on supervision, and this is a question from me, you are the only individual that,
supervises.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, Spizzato has managers as well.
Right, and I envision it that those managers at Spizzato are feeding information to you, and at times you may need to be the one actually going out and looking at something they've got going.
Well, of course, we supervise everything that's, I mean, not the like lawn mowing every Friday, but yeah, any of the plantings and landscaping, it's all part of my inspection list. Not to mention, if we do one-offs like tree planting, that's a little different, because I usually meet with them a couple of times prior to, and then we usually meet after to do a closeout for everything.
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say, if I understood you correctly, that you believe their performance has improved.
I do believe so,
And I
yes.
think that's, you know, because I look at it from the standpoint, if we're actually going to be able to refresh our, especially Rehoboth Avenue and Munson, and other areas around the city with new plantings as well, you know, through March and so forth, that to hear that you're confident that they are doing a really worthwhile job for us, I think that's a good development.
And, you know, like I said, and ending on a positive note, I think what's great is at this time, we can tell people we're trying to get funds from homeowners and property owners. We can tell them that Rehoboth Avenue is being refreshed, like you said. Munson Avenue is being dealt with, which is a major thing I've heard about. So I think it's all positive. I think it's great. And we'll have a watering program, which is essential. So that's why I'm saying I think it's a lot of positive.
And Liz, while we're talking about it, remind me, because I just have too many things going in my very small brain sometimes. The trees on State, are they in need of some replacement? And is that up to us or not? Because State is
No, we've
Del
taken
Dot.
care of it. The one is I think because I replaced the one and it still didn't.
It still doesn't like
I
it.
think it's the spot more than anything, but they're doing okay overall.
So you'll keep an eye on State Street?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I hear less about State and more about Munson.
What was I gonna? Oh, but I was gonna say the one thing good about our current contractor is and I think Katie can attest to this, but the volume of work we require from them is not easily met. Perhaps they would be one of only 2 companies that could actually handle the volume and on-demand work in the area. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that they have hundreds of employees. I mean, other cities, like I know a couple years ago, Lewis's contractor, he was, and I don't know if he still works for them, but they were struggling to keep up because they just didn't have the manpower.
Yeah, most companies aren't large enough to, to come into the city, I mean, and have, to come into the city and do work plus do other work that they might have. I mean, they would have to solely work for the city, and
Nobody wants to put all their eggs in one basket.
Right,
So
yeah.
Well,
that is
here's what I think is depressing. It's
Mm-hmm.
depressing to me. And
Depressed.
maybe y'all can tell me, don't be depressed. Go home, you know,
We were trying to end on a
fix
positive note.
something, fix like a, never mind. So, the beautiful pictures you showed at the beginning, and I hear you, what you're saying, that there are all different levels, and there may be problems embedded there, Liz, that will show up in a few years. But it is quite stunning to me sometimes how you can look at those pictures and see so many other examples. And then honestly, just for me personally, I look at some of ours and it just looks neglected. And maybe it's because we don't have color, we don't have, any decorative fences around them or whatever that could serve a dual purpose, But ours, to me, just look, I hate to say, they almost look like they're an afterthought. And I don't know if there is a solution to that. I don't know, after the refresh is done with the replantings, that when you say you're planting trees, I'm not envisioning anything else. It's just the tree. Unless you
no.
can correct me on that.
No, we're gonna do, because the problem with the tree pits is every time people just walk right through them.
Yeah.
Every time we have a fest, I mean, it's the same
Yeah,
as the lawn
sure.
at the bandstand, I have to get replaced. Every time we have a festival, a parade, they get trampled. Every time somebody parks their car, they don't walk 2 feet to the left around it, they walk through it. So keeping that in mind, everything gets trampled.
Yep.
When Rehoboth Avenue was originally done, I think all the tree pits were vegetated. So the things that seem to last the best have been the juniper ground cover, which I personally hate.
Yeah.
And you don't want woody, you like it? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh,
Nobody
I was
does.
like, and you don't really want woody stems competing
Yeah.
with trees.
Yeah.
So generally you don't want that much under there. But what we're gonna do is have some of the grasses that were originally planted, because they seem to have done the best, put under there. And they're very low maintenance, because I mean, none of the salvia or any of the flowers lasted.
They're just not gonna do it.
Well, and I think to your point, if we're thinking like Rehoboth Avenue, Terry showed pictures of the median. Look to the right, all the beautiful Zelkovas with their big vase-shaped canopies. I mean, I get comments on how beautiful it is.
And I have heard some of those as well.
But when people live here, you get immune to it's like growing up having a view of the beach and you don't realize tourists come and ooh and ah
How beautiful it really is.
over the dolphins, and you're like, another dolphin. Like, so it's easy to overlook the beautiful parts and focus just on the purple plums. That's probably as good as they'll look ever, but to focus on that stuff. But I think the honey locust and the Zelkovas are both good choices that have done well on our streets and do lend a nice height and camouflage to some of the buildings. So I think those look good. It's really just that, unfortunately, the center is just all concrete and very small.
Catherine.
would it be something that we might be able to do as a committee and try to, I mean, not right now with the Commemorative Tree Fund, but in the future, try to raise money so that we could purchase, you know, like the edging or something, the little fencing to go around the trees around the tree pits to keep people from walking into.
And I know that's come up before, it's come up before, and it always seems to get pushed aside, or my recollection of the last 6 years is pushed aside because of liability issues. With people tripping over them and this
that
and,
is
yeah.
concern. I know there's, I think it was Milton had that problem. But then you look at like New York City, and that's
It's
their standard
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
is
that's
that
what I'm saying.
you
There's
have
cities
to
do it
be-
successfully.
Well, I'm not saying we can't make any kind of recommendation that we can come to consensus on. So I like what Catherine's saying about, you know, could we? And maybe in our next agenda, or if some folks want to think about that.
And I've discussed it with the mayor and the city manager before, and
What'd they say?
one of the challenges that I brought up, they were all very supportive of it, but one of the challenges I brought up with them is that our tree pits are not perfect rectangles. They're angled and round, and so we would not be able to fence everything in perfectly. But we look at it as that's a 15-year-old project, and like I said, so much has changed in 15 years. The advancement of like silva cells and permeable surfaces, and that going forward, and I think the mayor spoke to this a few meetings ago, going forward, looking at streetscapes, those options should be explored, and certainly silva cells, which at one time were, you know, $30,000, have significantly come down in price because of competition and time on the market.
What's a silva cell?
It's a planting
I do-
material.
It's a pit?
No,
It's not a pit.
No, it's if you've ever been to like a pedestrian plaza, or especially in the cities, they have them because they have stormwater requirements, and you just see the tree and you're like, how is that alive? Because it's underneath, they have a containment system basically that allows the trees to develop roots and have water and stuff like that. And it's really cool.
It's like a big, it's like you plant the tree in a big crate.
It's like grids, yeah.
Like grids.
Have you ever seen
So
it?
that's
It's
all down below
it's
the
all
surface.
below.
It's all down below.
So you don't see anything.
Liz, I was gonna ask you, when you said someone is looking into the streetscapes, who's doing that? Is there a committee right now, or is there anybody doing that?
No, I said as they look into them, because I know the commissioners are always talking about Wilmington and
Baltimore. Yeah.
Baltimore streetscape. So as those keep coming up on the table and they move along into consideration designs and stuff like that, this is where we put in the plug that we need to look at silva cells.
So there's no committee set up right
and
now?
flexi pave and
Well, this would be my question to Commissioner Byrne and Commissioner-elect Gay. That if y'all can, through your discussions and what you know that we will not necessarily be privy to, if you can focus on, because I had the same question, Terry, which is streetscape, when and who.
And who's doing research?
Yeah, because I think it would be good for us to know, is there gonna be a focus on that in 12 months, 18 months, 36 months? I think it's just good to know, you know, that, is that a project that's 3 years down the road or 10 years down the road, you know? So we'll look to you guys to kind of help us understand where the thought process is, and how would that even, you know, who would be the leadership on that, you know? Because I'm sure somebody's got it in the back of their head of, well, at some point.
And we expect
Yeah.
the new CDP
Yeah.
to, at a minimum, reiterate what was in the last one, but
Yeah.
probably in a stronger,
Yeah.
more immediate
Yeah.
kind of a need.
Yeah.
And that'll move it toward
But
budgeting
the
as
trees that are
well.
going in on Rehoboth Avenue, that's kind of its own project, right? I mean, that's not really
we're
tied
not
into.
modifying any of the planting sites.
Right,
It's
okay,
very,
yeah.
it's just like construction damage. You have to do
Right.
all this stuff in advance and preventative. Once a
Excuse me, I've got to run.
Well, I'm gonna bring us to closure right now. And Dick, if you've got to leave us, you're not gonna miss anything at this point.
Thank you.
Well, except here, it says we're discussing a path forward.
Well, we don't have time for that today, so we're not going to be
Okay,
discussing
That's fine,
that.
we'll move that to the next.
Yes, we will, we'll move it to the next one.
Yeah.
Because I personally believe that we've got quite a bit on our plate right this minute, because getting our commemorative tree completely launched is, I think, really, really important to this group. And since that will be completed then in the next month, or so we hope, I think that's wonderful. So we've got another meeting coming up October 11th. Obviously, that will be prior to the commemorative tree
Yes.
presentation. So we'll have another shot at talking together.
Yep.
I'm gonna put on the next agenda item, the tree fencing concept, to see if we wanna talk about that a little bit more in depth, and if we wanna do anything with it in the interim, or just land on, it will be, part of streetscape, which will be part of the CDP, which has its own timeline. Terry?
I was gonna ask you, instead of calling it the fencing, maybe call it like streetscape suggestions or something, because
I really do not want to put streetscape on
you're
our
true.
agenda
That's true.
and tie it to this committee until we know what's the overall thinking on that. So I appreciate what you're
Well, I'm just
you're
thinking, instead of limiting it to fencing, just treatment of understory of.
I will come up with some interesting language of how we're going to do that. And I don't want to forget to ask our citizen who is here with us to please take the microphone, identify yourself and your address, and talk to us.
Yeah, Joan Flaherty, 82 Sussex Street
Hi,
in
Joan.
Rehoboth, and I'm so glad you're all working on the projects that you mentioned today. I'm thrilled that there's a lot of interest in trees. I work with Rehoboth in Bloom, so I go downtown every Tuesday morning at 7:30 and water plants, and they have done very well this year. I have to say it was a very successful project. And one of the reasons-
Congratulations.
Yeah, it looks beautiful, it really does. It's
All
absolutely
credit goes to the organizers, Cindy
Yeah.
Lovett, I believe you're very involved. But one of the things I thought was interesting that I wanted to bring up is that volunteer groups work. And when there's enthusiasm for a project, you can get people to actually show up. And they've had 30 to 40 people showing up for the original organizing meetings for Rehoboth and Bloom. And I just think that you need some folks that would be equally as excited about trees in Rehoboth. I'm one of them, I'm one of those tree huggers. And I know a few others. But I was looking at Pennsylvania Horticulture Society the other day, and they have something that's called a Tree Tenders Program. And they are a dedicated cadre of people that come and look at every single tree that's planted. They either help with the planting or they're there observing the planting when if there's a contract involved and the tree is installed. And they're the people that go and water, maintain it, and they get back to Pennsylvania Horticulture Society report on it. Because, it's not only just watering, but sometimes you have to do a little pruning, things like that. And so they would catch things like this problem with too much mulch, because what they do with their volunteers is they train them in advance.
Yes, and there's a program.
And they have it on the website, and they have, a regular training that they conduct on their premises before the person becomes the volunteer. They have to go through, I think it's 9 hours of training. And so that people are invested in their trees. And I think that's what we need. I mean, I live on Sussex, and one of the largest champion trees in Rehoboth came down this summer. I mean, I literally was I knew it had to come down, but one of the reasons why it had to come down was because these branches were hit a lot by trucks coming down Sussex Street. So there's a multitude of things that go on. It wasn't because this tree had some, it had, I guess, damage by storms that probably caused the ending of it. But as a result of that, we lost a tree with all of this tree life. That, so what do we replace it with? Because now my entire block on one side is very hot, and there are no trees to speak of. There are these little spindly things that somebody puts in when they build a brand new house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They plant a 2-foot tree in the front, and that seems to be okay with the city of Rehoboth. There's no other room, basically, for a bigger tree. So I am applying to the city to try to put a couple of trees in, and I was glad to hear our arborist talk about tupelos, because that's what was recommended to me that would do well at a narrow part of this, between the sidewalk and the street.
Yeah.
So you answered several of my questions today, because I came to specifically say something about please replace those dead trees on Rehoboth Avenue. I'll come help.
The sad thing is there's only one actually dead tree. The rest are just
Peaches.
sad.
They're little
Yeah.
peaches.
They're
Peaches.
It's
I like that.
They're beyond
beyond, because, yeah, that,
But anyway, I do want to thank you for letting the public know that these trees will be replaced. And the only suggestion I have is that on the website, you have your committee, and you can, go in and listen to meetings, and most people generally are not going to listen to a long meeting, right? I mean, but if you just had a little section that just said, what are your projects and what you're working on, I think people would be delighted to know that you've put all this effort into all of these various projects that you've brought up. And if you just had a goal, Rehoboth Beach is going to replace 15 trees this year. People would, they would say, that's great, we're going to replace those dead trees. And if you had any kind of timeline, you can expect this to happen in the fall or in the spring. If you have a longer timeline, 5 years, we have a vision for the city to have, and we've got 60% tree canopy or something. I know we're like 40%, maybe.
40, 45.
40 to 45.
That's a
So
good
if you had
suggestion.
some of that just on the website, to me, it would inspire
That's a good
people to
idea.
A, get involved, and B, feel like we're moving forward.
And I think it's a great idea because we could add it to the Commemorative Tree site that's on there and say at the bottom, as a result of the program, this is what's planned in the next 6 months. I think that's a great idea.
If you
I like that too.
contribute, you sort of want to know, it's
Sure.
nice to get a thank you, but it's also like, guess what? Your tree's going to be planted on this date or something
Right,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Families sometimes, they are dedicating a tree to someone, they
Yeah.
want to go and see it, or, have a photo done or something like that.
Well, Joan, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming and giving us some feedback. That's
That's
great.
great.
Yeah.
And we'll take everything under advisement, absolutely. And good luck with Rehoboth in Bloom, for more and more of that.
Yeah.
Andrea, because I'm wrapping it up,
Okay,
guys. We're well over our hour and a half.
Doug Talamay, Joan, thank you. And of course, Sturgis. Doug Talamay, I just want to mark your calendars. It is the 21st of October at 10 o'clock in the morning.
How would that work if our 1021, was that one of our
No, it was
options?
22.
22.
22.
I took a gulp and,
Okay.
yeah, I
Thank
gulped
you,
at that
thank
point.
you.
But that's partially why I wanted to mention that. The other thing is that
What about
Doug Talamay is coming here.
Oh, he is?
Yes, yes, yes.
For?
Yes. For a lecture. He's going to speak to us here in this
Here.
very room.
Okay.
Public's invited.
Public's invited, thank you. 10 o'clock on the 21st. And there will be, I spoke to Chris, and there will be publicity coming out.
Yes, there will
Okay,
be.
yes. So,
What's this what's-
and the topic, we're trying to nail down a topic.
Okay.
I went back at him twice. It's about trees, 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 trees. And I know that Tom has done the same thing, that it's tree talk. So we'll see. He has not come back with a topic.
Because he does things other than
Yes,
trees.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So I did twice speak and say trees. So we don't yet have a topic.
Okay.
Okay.
and we're still
But
waiting
Chris-
to get his press pack. Well, as of a couple days ago, Chris
Yeah.
hadn't received his press packet.
Well, I just want to clarify, we have a topic, it's trees.
Yes,
Yes, but
but he needs.
But you need clarification from the speaker that that's what he's speaking about.
Correct.
Because if he's not speaking about trees, he doesn't match what our goal is. Okay, I just want to make
Yes,
make
it's-
sure
it's-
he does not have the latitude
Right.
to change the topic.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And he will signal that to us once he gives
Got
us.
it. Okay.
The other thing I wanted to just mention is that we had talked about pruning 101. And Liz has graciously offered to do that
Oh, great.
workshop.
That's wonderful.
Chris is waiting for a date, and we'll write something up. But the little piece of land that we went over and looked at today, there were pruning opportunities there, as well as she had offered City Hall. So I hope that some of you will come. We're going to set a date, Liz.
Wait a minute. This is pruning 101 on city property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we don't have a date yet?
No.
And there'll be a,
Chris will
something will
advertise.
precede the actual pruning?
What do you mean?
Telling people how to do it?
Oh, yeah. No, we're just gonna give them saws and
And
send them loose.
send them out to Deer Park. Oh, dear Lord.
Workshop, yes, no,
Okay, so that'll be a Liz workshop?
that's a Liz
And you're
workshop.
thinking, Liz, in the fall, in the
It can be whenever
winter,
you
in
guys
the
want.
spring?
Whenever, it doesn't matter to me. We don't need leaves to do it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think sooner, fall. Could we say fall,
Okay.
October-ish?
Got a lot
pretty
going
soon,
on,
yeah.
Andrea, in
Yeah.
We do,
October.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
there's-
all right.
there's-
I'll get with, no worries.
Yes,
It
I'll
was
get
and
with
next
difficult
folks.
to find a
workshop,
date.
y'all will talk more about the
Unveiling of the
details
spring in
on this. Okay,
All right,
Yeah.
and I just have one other question.
yes.
I know you want to. What is the status of the breakers and Elisa's letter?
I talked to Kevin Williams about the potential for trees. That was that issue,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And Liz, I believe the way Kevin and I left that meeting is Kevin Williams was going to follow up with you about trees at the breakers. So if you're not in the loop, that means that connection may not have been made
I
yet.
am unaware of any plans to utilize the
Okay.
property.
I will go back to Kevin Williams and figure out if there's a misfire. Okay. This meeting is going once, going twice. Thank you all for such lively input and research that you do and commitment to this. I'm so thrilled to continue on with this
And
group.
thank you, Liz, for all the details.
Oh, yeah, well,
No,
there's
but it's
just-
really important to
Excellent.
There's
convey
so
that.
much behind the scenes that sometimes you guys can't be aware of.
Yeah.
Right.
I work 8 hours a day doing this, so.
Well, and that's why when people ask us questions, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And they go, well, you're on the mayor's advisory committee, why don't you know? And I go, So,
Don't know, I can't know everything, right?
so tell me, Andrea, I need to meet with you.
Thank you all. I'm adjourning this meeting at 11:44.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.